Okay, explain. All right, tell us. You mentioned that we can talk about the nutritional part and how that goes to the WIC program, school lunches, all that type of thing. But as far as its impact on farmers, does it set prices? Does it tell them what they can grow, what they can't grow? Does it tell them how many acres? What does it do?
And that's changed. Some of those factors have changed over the years in various programs, and there were at times programs designed to control supply. So in the past, farmers may have been paid not to plant a crop because the supplies were too much. That's no longer the case anymore, but there was that. So that kind of leads to your question about dictating what they can plant, what they can't plant. Today's market or today's program doesn't have any of those conditions placed in there that farmers have to plant a certain crop.
Really?
And so in '96 they deemed it freedom to farm. So it just allowed you to plant whatever you want based on market conditions. And that's what farmers, how they determine what they're going to plant is various market conditions.
Wow.
But the commodity title of the Farm Bill has been structured to provide a safety net. And that safety net's really to ensure that we have agriculture and farming continue. So we don't run into those problems that we saw in the 20s where we didn't get crops in the ground and farms disappeared. And just to have that adequate supply of raw commodities to be turned into various products. There's some inefficiencies still in the commodity title. And I should back up. In the Farm Bill itself, or the Food Security Act, there's 15 different titles. And there's a commodity title which really focuses on the major crops grown in the United States. And there's conservation title, which puts together conservation programs. And so farmers can elect to put some of their non-fertile ground or ground that needs to be outside of a crop production to protect waterways, streams, rivers, etc. So they'll put grasses and conservation buffers in place to protect those. And most often, we call them highly erodible ground. Farmers don't want to plant in ground that's not going to yield a crop. So they'll put a conservation buffer in there to protect a lot of things. So, but from the commodity title perspective, that's where the safety net, and there's a lot of different facets in there that growers can elect to choose to protect their operation, and it varies regionally. The Midwest has different needs than the South, that the far Pacific Northwest or the upper Midwest Plains may have, and so that's always been the difficulty in crafting a very efficient farm bill, is because you have different interests in different regions around the country that have different needs.
All right, going back, though, to this, freedom to farm thing, I have heard, and I know, when did you say that was, like in the late 90s?
That was 96, was freedom to farm.
All right, because this was a lot fewer years than that. I remember hearing, and I can't remember who it was, but some celebrity who's a very wealthy person was on a talk show and mentioned that he had bought land somewhere because he bought acres, hundreds and hundreds of acres, and he did it because he was not, the government was paying him not to grow things. Now, so is that would not be true today? I mean, was he misinformed?
I mean, there's still a case of interest or landowners that have no connection to the farm whatsoever, and then whether it's celebrities, athletes, that's still the case. And I think those are the areas of inefficiency that our organization wants to see change. And they themselves may not have planted. They may have rented their ground out to a farmer to plant it, but the landowner does receive government support payments just for owning the land, and that land's in production. And that was in '96. It was they called them market transition payments, and the goal was to move farmers and agriculture away from a farm program safety net. And these market transition payments were a yearly payment that went to the farmer, or in some cases the landowner, regardless of how their crop performed. But unfortunately, with everything you see in D.C., once a program's created, it's really hard to stop that program.
Yeah.
And that has continued. And what farmers and our organization across the state are telling us is and we believe it as well, is that that's inefficient. That doesn't offer that protection that they need. And one of their big, what we've heard from farmers over the past year and a half, 2 years, is, we feel that the country's spending is getting out of control. We need to balance this budget. We need to reduce this inefficient spending. And so they're looking at their own programs, and the direct payment program is one of those that they receive regardless if they have a good crop or not. And it's not that true safety net to protect them if in case of something they can't control, like the weather this spring. They couldn't control that. That payment will be nice, but it's not going to ensure that they're going to be in operation next year. So
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute because we have a caller who wants to ask you something, and then I'm going to see if we can't do something. I'm having a real hard time with the sound. I'm getting this. I hope our listeners aren't, because I have earphones on, and I think it's going to, by the end of the hour, I'm going to be off the wall with it. So we'll see if we can't figure it out. Let's take the call first. I don't want to lose our caller. Good morning. You're on Dial and Speak.
Good morning, y'all. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
All right. I'm not sure who is speaking today. I come in late, but he's with the farmers.
Yes, he's talking about the farm growers.
Is he? Excuse me, sir. I don't mean to leave you out. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
My question would be on this number 5 bill. And
you're talking about Senate Bill 5?
Yeah.
That's got to do with unions. That doesn't have anything to do with farms.
Okay. Then I got the wrong bill. Okay. Let me ask this. Let's just ask the question straight up. All righty. Now, there's a lot of going on about in the government how they're trying to restrict our local farmers. They're trying to do away with quite a few things, and the injectional and all this on farms. If they don't apply or not the right word, agree for their farms, the big farms, for the cattle to be juiced up and all that, they get fined and all this. What is that all about? If you could answer that, I'll just hang up the
All right. Do you have anything to do with livestock? You don't, do you?
We work with the livestock industry very closely, because it's from a corn perspective, it's one of our larger markets.
Right.
And so I'm trying to get a sense of the question of government control and what they can and cannot do. In Ohio, a couple years ago, there was an issue 2, that wanted to create the Ohio Livestock Care Standards Board.
Right, which they did, correct?
Yeah, which they did, and
right.
They proceeded their first year. They've given recommendations to look at the care and well-being of livestock, and both from what consumers hope to see from how livestock's cared for, and also from a farm perspective, and to make sure we have a smooth transition into a new type of system to ensure those operations stay in business, but also meet the needs of the consumers. And that board is doing their job. They've got great representation, not only from agriculture interests, but also from animal welfare interests, from consumer food groups. So, I think we have to let that board continue to do its job and see what kind of recommendations come out, and if the General Assembly accepts those.
Yeah, so because I think she was talking about she said I think she was talking about organic and injecting hormones and chemicals, and that has nothing to do with you. You strictly are concerned with the feeding and the corn that they eat, but you have nothing to do with the rules, right? So that's a whole other topic, and that's an important one that we need to talk about. But you're the wheat and corn. You're the Corn and Wheat Growers Association, so
that's
you don't
correct.
deal with livestock. Okay. Going back to the farm bill, I am trying to get a handle on it, and I think you've explained some of it as to the commodities, and farming is a huge industry.
Yeah.
And there are things like futures and all kinds of terms that you don't usually associate with agriculture, and the money part of it.
Yes.
And most of that, maybe you could just make a comment as far as I always say the poor farmer, because the farmers usually are not the recipients of these huge amounts of money that are, that the gamblers on the stock market play with.
there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years of how much has the paper trading business been involved in the commodity markets, the speculators. And, I've heard experts in those areas say, yes, it's prevalent. Some say it's not as much as you think. But it's going to be there. And I remember in 2007, there was a story out that I think it was the California Teachers Pension Program. Mm-hmm. If you looked at their investments, they actually own the entire wheat crop in the United States because they saw this potential increase in wheat price, and they were going to get in at the low level.
Wow.
And let it rise. So it does take place. Again, how much does it impact? It's yet to be seen. I know there's discussions at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to determine at what level, but corn and beans and wheat are all commodities. And what we've seen really over the last 5-6 years, if you see oil prices go up or go down, you'll see commodity prices follow that. And they become very closely linked because agriculture does use a lot of energy with their production of fertilizer, with their fuel for their tractors. And so there's a lot of costs, a lot of risks associated with that. But so the speculators, it's yet to be determined. They are there. The market is based on the Chicago Board of Trade. Traders trade crops every single day. It'll go up, it'll go down. And farmers have to make decisions on what to plant based on that market, when to sell, how to sell it. Will they have a crop to deliver? And there were many in Ohio that were nervous about that because they've already sold their crop. And so it is not just go out and plant a crop and pray for rain and harvest it in the fall. They're small businessmen essentially, and they have to make decisions. And when prices are high like they are now, it sounds like farmers are doing great, but there's also more risk involved because as prices go up, all their input costs follow. Mm-hmm. And so there's more risk involved if they can't get a crop in the ground, and those could have dire consequences to a family.